I'm delighted to see you here all for Shakespeare Wallah and our James Ivory in Person series. And as you saw and as you just applauded, I would like to give a real heartfelt thanks to our film series sponsor, Graham Vanderstoel. He was really the support and the inspiration for this series, which is also inspired by his late wife, Eve Vanderstoel, who worked at the museum for many years and whose spirit continues to infuse much that goes on here. So we're just so grateful for that. We are extremely fortunate that James Ivory is here with us this week and presenting 3 programs of early films by the now I wrote it down, I'm not even going to be able to say it, by the amazing Merchant Ivory team. And if you were here on Wednesday, you got to see a film of each of their films that they made independently, and the film The Sword and the Flute that brought the 2 of them together. So that was a special treat. Since the beginning of their collaboration, they've made scores of amazing films that depict the joy and challenges of love and friendship and tolerance across the boundaries of class and culture. And they always do, they're expert at depicting this with a real wit and tenderness and sense of fun. And I think you'll see all of that in the film that we'll be seeing tonight, Shakespeare Wallah, which is the duo's second feature film, and it depicts an expatriate theater troupe all but adrift in a rapidly changing post-colonial India. So you see these themes of sort of class and culture are already active in these very early films, and I think they continue throughout the films, as you probably know from having seen them. Mr. Ivory will be here with us after the screening for the Q&A, but right now I would just like you to join me in welcoming James Ivory.
Good evening, everybody. I don't want to say very much about the film. It's a long film, and I'm going to say more here. But it was the film that really put us on the map, and it was our second film. And for years and years and years, we always thought of Shakespeare Wallah as our best friend, until we had a second best friend, as happens in life, when we made A Room with a View. And then we had 2 best friends. But anyway, as this film was restored recently, I was able to see it several times, and both in theaters with people and at the lab where it was being done. And I really come to know it again, and I remember every sort of thing that happened all through it, and I think, oh my God, why did that happen? Where was I that day? And so on. But anyway, you don't know those things. So let's go then and watch it, and then I'll tell you more. Okay. We had made The Householder, and Shashi Kapoor was the star of that, and he was married to Jennifer Kendall, who played the hotel keeper there, and we knew Felicity. She was then 14. But I had another idea about a traveling group of actors going around in India and not doing very well. But then it was Ruth Jalvala, who thought that to let it be a Shakespearean troupe, and that is what the Kindles always did. They went around for, I think, 20 years doing Shakespeare. And in the beginning, when they started out, they had big crowds, and it was, as he said, I mean, it was a big success always, and wonderful audiences. And gradually, they just dwindled away. So, for Ruth, there was a sort of a metaphor there. She saw in that the kind of decline
decline in the desire to have and know European culture, and the culture of the new India was coming up, which didn't necessarily mean films. She didn't really have that much, and I know we used that as one of the aspects.
And were the candles ever in films before?
No,
Because they're quite
they
great.
never had been. And they weren't entirely happy in the roles. I mean, the mother and the father, because the film seemed to be a negation of their whole lives. So, but they were good troopers, good, very good English sports. You know, there's nothing like the English, and so they went into it with full enthusiasm. But it wasn't with that much happiness, I think.
If there are questions from the audience, please raise your hands and wait for the microphone to come. So we'll start right there.
Who was it who died in the film? I thought it was her father.
No, it was the actor called Bobby. He's the one who died, not the father. It was Bobby, and Bobby was he had been the real Bobby had been a clergyman at the time of the British in New Delhi, but he was also a sort of part-time actor. So.
Any other questions? Here.
Hi, such a beautiful film. I was wondering, I read that you were able to work with some of Satyajit Ray's crew, but I was wondering how he came to do the music for the film.
Well, I asked him. I asked if he would do it, but he had been very much involved with us on The Householder, because that was our previous film, and which we did two versions of, one in Hindi and one in English. And when we'd edited one of the versions, it just seemed a kind of shapeless, too long thing. And by that time I knew Ray, and I'd met him earlier, and so we asked him if we could bring the film to Calcutta to show it to him and see what he had to say about it. So we took the whole film, The Householder, to Calcutta, and he liked it. But he said he thought he could, with his editor, he could probably give it a better shape and form and reduce the length of it a bit, because it was extremely long. And that's how we worked together. And then he got very much involved in the music of the Householder also. He put together a little sort of orchestra, and he didn't exactly write the music, but he was very much singing it. That was at a point in his own career when he was like writing the music for his own films. And so I asked him if he would do the Shakespeare Wallah music. He agreed right away.
This question here.
I'll try.
Wait for the microphone, because everyone can hear you then.
Thank you. Were the stagings of the plays that were in the film, were those faithful to how the Kendalls had presented?
That was their style. And I realize it was now, and having seen a great many Shakespeare plays since then, and particularly in England, I realized that it was a bit over the top. But it's what they did, and I felt I really shouldn't change that. But I did, at the time, I didn't feel it was over the top. It was only after many years. And now, when I go to a Shakespeare play, in my mind, subconsciously, are they as good as the Kendalls? Really, particularly in a play like Othello or something like that. So it's a strange thing, but.
Hi, wondered two things. One, have you ever had the chance to return to Shimla since the movie? Two, I wondered what port was she sailing from at the end? And think, started with Shashi being married to one of the Kendalls?
Okay, one, I have not been back to Simla since we made the film. Two, the ship sailed from Bombay. There was a French line that went I don't know where it started out, somewhere in Southeast Asia, and came eventually to Bombay and then went on up through the Suez and I guess to Marseille. And the last question, yeah, I kept up with the Kendalls, I mean the Kapoors and the Kendalls all those years. I mean, I'm still very close to them. I mean, Shashi's gone, well, most of them are gone. The only one who's really still around is Felicity, who became an enormous star in England. I don't know if you know that, but she was a tremendous star on the stage and in television. I mean, everything the parents wanted for her, she had, to an extraordinary degree. I think the first thing she ever did was, when she got there, was a little sort of short film for TV with John Gielgud. It was just a two-part thing with John Gielgud, and she took off from that, and then she was a big television star.
Hello. It was a beautiful film. I'm here. I really enjoyed watching it. The locations were especially just very evocative, I felt, and I wondered if you could speak a bit about shooting on location and what the production was like, and also how you came to work in India in your career.
Well, that's a big story. The locations, well, when we had the script, then we wanted to go to Lucknow. I wanted to go to Lucknow because I'd seen that fantastic house that the film starts in. It's called La Martinière, which was the sort of palace of a French soldier of fortune who built it. I was so extraordinary pile, and I just had to work there. And then we needed a palace in Rajasthan, so we went to the one in Alwar. And then Simla was a necessary thing. I mean, Simla and Kasauli. Kasauli was the hill station where they were first. And then they moved on to Simla, where there's a theater there called the Gaiety Theater. And that was built for the entertainment of the British who went to Simla in the summertime. There was a great deal of theater that was done there to entertain the British. And so we worked there. Well, how I went to England, you should have been here the night before last. You wouldn't ask that question. Well, I went to India to make a documentary film, and then while I was making that, I made Ismail, who was very keen to make English language pictures about Indian life, which could then be seen in the West, which is exactly what he did, or we did, with our first 4 features. And I kept going back, as you know.
On Wednesday you told us about Syed Jaffrey and Mother Jaffrey. So you met them then, but Mother Jaffrey on the screen is so unlike the person. She always seemed to be playing bitchy roles. Could you tell us more about it? And didn't she win the Silver Bear from Berlin?
She did. She when the film came to the West after we finished it, it was in the Berlin Film Festival and in competition, and she won Best Actress. She's extremely unlike a kind of Bollywood film star of that type. I mean, in the first place, she was awfully thin, which they're usually not, and not the kind of over-the-top kind of sexy, type that they have to have in those films. And the crew was kind of disappointed when they saw her. When she arrived on the set to play that part, and they looked at her, the Indian crew, this wasn't, you know, but she convinced everybody.
Just a bit of history. In 1960, I saw the Kendall family perform at Bishop Cotton School in Simla. And Shashi Kapoor was still on stage. He had not joined the movie industry. And Simla was the summer capital of British India because they always had summer capitals in every state that they ruled because they couldn't tolerate the heat of the plains.
Well, you're one of the very few people I've ever talked to who saw them. Actually saw Shashi on stage, right?
Right, and they were called Shakespeareana.
That's right. That was the name of their company. And what play was it?
No, they did bits of different plays. I was completely transfixed. They did bits of Merchant of Venice. That's where I remember that Shashi Kapoor came in.
And he was in the Merchant of Venice.
Yes, and that's beyond that. My memory fails me.
Well,
Jennifer Kendall has played an excellent role in India in the Prithvi Theatre in Bombay, which holds experimental theatre. It's now in its 50th year and it's free.
Right.
So she was just wonderful.
right.
Thanks for a wonderful film. But I'm wondering, how did you select the scenes from Shakespeare? Was that Ruth Shavala or the Kendalls or a combo? How did that come about?
I selected them, and I've been an amateur Egyptologist since I was 12 years old. So I've always wanted to do. I've always liked to play Antony and Cleopatra. So here was my chance to have a Cleopatra. And but the others kind of we needed some of the major dramas, and then we wanted light things in addition. I don't know how we. I mean, I'm sure I talked to Ruth about it, but I remember very much at the very beginning saying, "I'm having Antony and Cleopatra." So.
The scene, hi, thank you so much for this terrific film and for coming tonight. That scene with their first kiss and then the fog bank comes in, I thought that was really wonderful, and I couldn't even exactly explain why, but it lent such significance, I felt, because it took it away from any other movie I'd ever seen, right there. And I was wondering if you could speak to that. Also, just on a technical level, I assume you didn't use a fog machine, so I assume...
Well, in a way, you did.
Yeah, so I guess I'm wondering how you did it and why you did it.
Okay, half of the scene, when they were up at the top of the hill, was actually photographed in the fog. I mean, there was a fog, and we shot that, it was probably September when we were doing it, or October, but anyway, there was fog. So the first half of the scene had been shot in the fog, and then the second half it was all sunny. There was no more fog; it was gone for the season. But we were able to get from the Indian Army smoke bombs. So, but it's a good thing the film was not in color, because the color of the smoke bomb is yellow. So the second day of the shoot, or second and the third day, we used the smoke bombs, and we sort of strategically placed them here and there along the road and or their path as they went into the clinch, and it worked out. I mean, the wind blew. We didn't cause these openings and things, but what we did do, we had several takes. And in each take, the wind blew in a different way. And you see a little bit more or a little bit less. And that is, we had what long ago were called dissolves. And we put 2 or 3 of those, I think 2 maybe, 2 together, and then it seems absolutely perfect. But it wasn't like that. It was very much a made-up thing.
is thank you for a wonderful film. And I especially loved the Shakespeare scenes. And I think that was the funniest Malvolio I have ever seen. And you would swear he was wearing yellow garters. Thank you so much.
That is actually a play I'd like to I would like to do as a film.
I would like you to too.
I'd like that. And let me tell you, I wanted Hugh Grant to play Malvolio. I think, I don't know, Hugh Grant now is perfection for that part, and God just put him on this earth to play Malvolio as far as I'm concerned. And I told him that, and I said, I want you and let's make this. He said, I would be laughed off the screen. No one would believe it. It would be a disaster. No, I can't do it. But maybe he'll change his mind. It's quite possible.
You've had the experience now to review work from some time past. What is it like to sit with an actor or actress as they watch themselves 30 years ago?
To sit with an actor and actress? Well, they are always full of complaints. Always. Either I've done something wrong, or they've done something wrong, or the things are just against them. Yeah, they're never happy. I can't think of a time when I came out of a screening with an actor when they came out and said, well, you know, well, they would never do that. They would never say, wasn't I good, or anything like that. They'd come out saying, well, I don't know. They're not happy. They should be. Anyone? Back there?
I just had a question about, sorry. There was a very interesting, visually arresting shot from a very high up, far distance of a truck on a road, a vehicle on a road. Where was that taken? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly. There's only one shot like it in the film.
Yeah.
And that's when it was somewhere between the point where the troop they'd stopped on their trip, and they were sitting around and reading the newspaper and all that kind of thing. And then Shashi drives up in his Mercedes, and it was somewhere between there and Kasauli, which was the hill station where we shot so many other scenes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I last saw this decades ago, and it's just so beautiful and so moving. And this time, I really was terribly struck by Shashi Kapoor and the yearning that he seems to have. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, it seemed to me as though he was yearning not only for the young actress, but for meaning, for what she represents in her family. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, he wanted to be taken seriously, yes, and not just be a rich young man, playboy with a film star mistress. And yes, he did have all kinds of serious and quote artistic thoughts, but it's like many young men, right? I mean, it was never going to develop into anything, but you do feel like that, and that's rather a lame answer.
Hi. Thank you. That's a great movie and a great title too. I was wondering if you have any opinions on some of the other movies on similar, or TV series on similar themes, as Paul Scott's The Raj Quartet or some of Rumor Gardens.
Well, I saw them all, and I saw them, and we stole actors from those TV shows again and again and again. I mean, our English films are full of people who were in those various TV films or shows. I like them. I quite like them. I mean,
I was told I wasn't supposed to like them so much, but in fact I did like them. And so.
Thank you.
Fantastic film. I just wanted to comment on two things that popped up in my mind after seeing it tonight. Was the Jeep scene with the when he first arrives. I thought that was magnificently choreographed, and I was wondering how you were able to create such a great scene. It was almost like the Jeeps were animals.
Well,
and the light of the...
Well, it was a nightmare to do. Really a nightmare, because we wanted to do it at magic hour when there's still sufficient light, but no sunlight. And magic hour is very short everywhere in the world. It seemed particularly short. So we had to keep, I don't know how many nights we had to go out there and do a couple of shots, and then hope that they would all match, which they more or less do, if it's graded properly.
Did you visualize this scene before you shot it? This is the way you wanted that to happen?
Well, you know, they're stopped on the road, and then their vehicle's broken down, and then it gets dark, and then someone comes along in two Jeeps and helps them. It's not that difficult to imagine. No, I don't do drawings and things and storyboards. I never have. I get bored so fast when I have to do that. So we just sort of did it, you know, imagined it. This is the way it would be. And as I say, what was difficult about it was the fact that a great many shots. I don't know how many shots that scene has, but probably at least a dozen. And you could not do more than two or three a night, and then you'd have to wait for the next night, and then just hope that you got there that more or less at the same time in the evening were able to shoot.
You mentioned that yourself and Ismail mentioned one of these films to show India to the outside world. What was the reception for this film like in India itself?
Well, because it had won, you know, a prize for Madhur Jaffrey, it immediately made it famous in India. And of course, the fact that Shashi had made it at all, it was already a famous movie. It was liked, quite liked. It wasn't a big success. I mean, it was not. None of our Indian films are ever really a big success in India, but it was okay. There were people who wrote bad things about it, though. They wrote that it was anti-Indian. It was anti-Indian because the Indians chosen for those roles were not the best representatives of the new India. You had a decadent Maharaja, you had a playboy, and you had a movie actress, which is the same as to say a courtesan or a prostitute, and that represented India. Whereas you had the noble English suffering away and working hard and speaking Shakespeare, and so it was. There was a sort of thing in the press about that was what was said. Not everywhere. Some people weren't so stupid, but some people, it was said. And in big papers. As I remember, I think it was in the Statesman of Calcutta had the idea about it being anti-Indian.
That was a very lovely film. Thank you. I liked a lot of the shot composition. There were a lot of really very tender and also well played two shots. The staging with Shakespeare was wonderful. One that was very different than everything else in the film was the brawl scene in the theater. And I wonder if you could comment about how that was to direct that and what it took to get
Well, it just was a brawl. That's all I can say. I mean, it really wasn't something you could direct. I mean, they knew what to do, and all those guys jumped on each other and did it. And
The one thing I did very definitely remember doing was telling the old couple to come up on the stage and then turn around and go back. I did tell them to do that. But on the whole, the fight in the two boxes, or the main box, it just happened. We photographed it actually happening. We were hoping that Shashi wouldn't get hurt, obviously.
I'm following it through with that comment from how was the film received in India. It's interesting, two things come to mind is one, the ending, where the girl just leaves on the boat and goes away to England. Was it, I think, if you took any Bollywood film, it would never end like that. It would end happily. And I think one other thing. Second thing was the kissing scene with Shashi Kapoor. Did it offend the Indians too much? Because, or did it affect his career? Because you will never see a kissing scene in Indian movies.
I know.
And
We
so I
had
was
to
trying to
take it to
figure
this-
out how because Kapoor comes from a very well-known Kapoor family, Raj Kapoor and everyone.
Sure.
And I was wondering, did it affect his career at all, or?
Well, I mean, all of the Kapoors, if the Indian censors had allowed them, Raj, Shami, and Shashi would have all kissed like mad in their movies, but they were not allowed to. And the kissing scenes in this film we had to get them past the censor. But by the time the film came out in India, it was already sort of famous, and I don't know what, Ismail always worked wonders with the censors. I don't know what he did, but.
I was just wondering, is that Asha Bhosle's?
Was that Asha Bhosle's voice at the Bollywood number?
In where?
In the Bollywood number, when she was filming the Bollywood song.
No. It was a proper singer.
Yeah, Asha Bhosle. She sings most of the Bollywood films.
I see who you're saying. Yes, I can't remember. Might well have been. If you recognize her voice, and it was somebody good that we got.
It wasn't. It was someone else.
Could well be.
Thank you. The actors had so much affection for the tools of their trade. They were always playing with their collars and their costumes and putting stuff away and taking it out. And it seemed like the film also had a great deal of affection for their objects. And I'm just wondering whose affection that was. Was
The
that
Kendalls.
It was the
They
Kendalls?
made those. They made everything.
Yeah.
They made all those ruffs, those Elizabethan ruffs. They made.
We saw them making them.
Huh?
We saw
Oh.
them making them. Yeah, I mean,
well,
she was
fiddling
sewing
with one,
them.
exactly.
Yeah.
And they made their costumes. I mean, the Shakespearean costumes they made. I don't mean they sewed them.
Yeah.
But they went out and bought the right material in the bazaar, and found people to make them, and who followed the exact instructions. All of the things that they had were there was an 18th century, a superb 18th century gentleman's frock coat that they had, a pale green, that was seen in the Lucknow situation that someone had. It was a real one. And I don't know where they got it, but it was a real 18th century, very, very grand frock coat. I always wanted to steal that. I tried and tried and tried to get them to give it to me, but they never would. Wouldn't have fit me, but I still wanted it.
Hello, again. On Wednesday, after the film, you spoke a little about a film you've just completed. Would you tell us a little more about what you're doing, what kinds of things you're working on now, or have just completed?
No, it's not a film that was completed. It was a screenplay that I wrote for Alexander Payne, and this is going to be made by Fox Searchlight, presumably, and it's going to take place in Chicago. It's a modern story.
I see.
That's what I've just most recently done.
And I wonder if you'd say a little more about the Afghanistan footage that you mentioned.
The footage from Afghanistan.
Yes.
Well, I went to Afghanistan in 1960 to get away from the heat of Delhi, where I was making another film. And I went to Afghanistan, not knowing anything about it, but except that it was cool. And I shot about 10,000 feet of 16 millimeter film of just whatever I saw, or whatever they allowed me to see, let's put it that way, in and around Kabul. And but that, I never edited that footage. I just kept it all these years, and recently I've taken it out, and we've been looking at it and thinking about it. And I have a friend who's a filmmaker who lives in Paris, and we've already begun to work on it in some kind to find some kind of form for it. It will have to be a kind of a memory thing, I think. But let's see.
Sorry if you answered this on Wednesday night, but what was the process of directing Indian actors? And how do you contrast it with the Western actors, and what process changes did you do, and how did you adapt?
Well, you know, if they're trained and experienced, they're very, very good. And the only problem that in our films, because our films are usually in English with a bit of Hindi in them, or Urdu, the problem came if we had an actor whose English, if they could not be expressive in English. They might speak English very well and read and write it and so on, but the problem was whether or not they could act expressively in English. And sometimes they couldn't. And that was one of the difficulties of making films in India, in English. And on the other, one of our films, The Householder, was made in both Hindi and in English. And I had a lot of people helping me. Obviously, I had to have. I mean, there were a lot of people on the set. If someone made the tiniest mistake in intonation, in grammatically or anything, or even an accent, they were leapt upon by a whole bunch of people to make it better. But it was not something I could do. I mean, I could work with them as a director, and their acting, and I mean, how did they do the scene? Was it convincing emotionally and all that kind of thing? But I was not in control of how they did it, how they acted in Hindi. But of course, in English, it was a different matter. And but they were all pretty good. I mean, Shashi is excellent, and most of them were excellent. Madhur, and they're all very good at English. But that was always a problem. There were wonderful, wonderful actors in India. You knew you'd seen them and doing all sorts of things, or maybe you'd seen them in a Bollywood film, and you knew they were great, and you loved their face, and you liked everything about them, their energy and everything. But they could not really act in English. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this film. As somebody with a Shakespeare background, I love the idea of players on the road. I found myself noting the music, and I always found myself very touched by Rai's music in the Apu trilogy, particularly when the music is accompanying figures on the road and traveling. There's something